Time for the press review on the programme. One of our main headlines, the main headline really, it's dominating the French press today, of course, the 10-year commemoration since the Paris attacks. Dipti's been looking through it all for us, Dipti.
Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. 10 years on, France is preparing to commemorate the victims of the November 13th, 2015 Paris attacks. For those directly involved, the last decade has been traumatic. This is something that Le Parisien newspaper is looking at on its front page. In its edition today, it talks about Salim Tourabali. He was a security guard at the Stade de France stadium on the night of the attacks. He prevented a terrorist from entering the stadium. He was also there when some of the other terrorists blew up their vests. And Le Parisien explains that he lives with that trauma 10 years on, where 10 years later, he even attempted suicide at one point. It's why Le Parisien here says, the night that still haunts us all. Libération, for its part, is looking at life after survival, it too gathering testimonies from some of the survivors of the Paris attacks, including a hostage at the Bataclan concert hall. That attack, of course, killed 90 people. Well, you have L'Humanité here on its front page looking at living memory. It talks about the legacy of terrorism in France after all these years, noting that the threat of terrorism has not completely subsided in France. While we look across the border to Le Soir, the Belgian paper, it also is looking at the Paris attacks, but from a different point of view. The Belgian paper is looking at the neighbourhood of Molenbeek. That, of course, was the neighbourhood from where some of the terrorists grew up, and from where they planned their terrorist operations. In its edition today, Le Soir looks at efforts by the neighbourhood to shed its image as one of being terrorist affiliated. And they say that even 10 years later, it's still very hard to shed that image. They still feel very much stigmatized.
Let's move to something else. COP30 summit continues its course in Belém in Brazil, of course. The Daily Telegraph, though, is looking at Tehran's drought, which could make the city basically unlivable.
Yeah, and in the imminent future as well, it's a crisis that the Daily Telegraph calls national and extraordinary. Tehran has about 9 days of drinking water left in its reserves as we speak. If it doesn't rain in the city soon, authorities may have to consider the possibility of evacuating the city's 10 million residents as well as government offices. While a lack of rainfall can be partially to blame for this crisis, other factors are at play, and that's what the Daily Telegraph explains here. Thoughtless government mismanagement of Iran's water resources, but also, as you see here from Iran International, a network television, their website here, they explain that aging networks, water networks, and decades of overpumping have led to water wastage. And also in this analysis, it looks to another model, the Cape Town model, or the so-called Cape Town model, because back in 2015, South Africa's city of Cape Town was also facing going dry within days. Now, thanks to strict discipline by city authorities, water usage eventually fell by 50% in less than 2 years. The network also offering solutions for Tehran to follow Cape Town's example, scaling up recycling, more authorities, transparency from authorities, public education, realistic pricing. But all of this at the moment seems like an uphill battle.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of answers there, at least potentially anyway. Now, meanwhile, the Indian capital of New Delhi has become almost unlivable in the summer, but now also in the winter months even.
Well, Le Monde actually explains, the French paper explaining that once upon a time, New Delhi's winter months were sort of a solace from the suffocating heat of the April-May months of summer. Now, it's no longer the case. Winters have also become toxic for Delhi's 30 million residents. The end of harvest year burning or agricultural burning and Diwali-related firecrackers being set off means that fine particle pollution in the capital has become a real health hazard. Since 2010, pollution-linked deaths have increased 38%. That's according to the scientific journal, The Lancet, that's cited here in this article. But also the cost is quite staggering, $100 billion per year in lost productivity and health expenses. The government has attempted some short-term solutions, but critics say they're not addressing the long-term solutions that are harder to implement, of course, like banning petrol cars, developing public transport, and moving Delhi's industries out of the city.
Finally, let's have a moment of lightness. A new study has revealed the best way to shoo away seagulls. It's not just go, wah, wah.
Well, it is sort of.
Sort of? Okay.
Sort of. You know, our these dear seagulls, the thieving birds who steal our fries on the beach, they slop up our untouched food. Of course, it's not all their fault because their loss of habitat means that they're encroaching more and more on our habitats to look for food. Nonetheless, their brazen swooping and adamant refusal to leave can be a great source of frustration. Researchers at the University of Exeter set out to show that physical violence isn't needed to scare off gulls. They tested the reaction of 61 Cornwall gulls when they heard the sound of a man speaking in a calm voice versus an angry voice. The conclusion: continue yelling at seagulls, they react best to it.
Okay, we can yell at. I thought you were going to say you have to just say, "Excuse me, would you mind moving on?"
That would be a very British way of dealing with the situation.
Way of doing it, yeah.
Very polite, but not effective at all. You can yell at them.
Yeah. Flap a bit. Dipsy with the papers for us on France 24.